Hey kiddos, gather around. It's story time on today's Saturday Showcase. I'm Matt.
I'm Tim, and every tree has a story. And today we're talking about some of the history behind some of the pioneers in Japanese maples in the United States. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and sign up for our weekly emails on MrMaple.com. We're going to be talking about when some of our most popular selections first came to the United States. Today, we're talking about Yokohama Nurseries.
So some of our Saturday showcases are going to focus on the stories behind Japanese maples. We love this geeky deep dive kind of stuff. Today we've got one of the original catalogs from Japan into the United States here from Yokohama Nursery, and a few of the selections they talk about in that catalog. This will be reminiscent of our Red Maple Nurseries video, but we're going to talk a little bit about Yokohama Nursery, and not necessarily their introductions, but some of the trees they popularized in America, and some of the first times these things were ever offered here in the United States.
So Yokohama Nursery was founded in 1890. And that same year, they opened an office in San Francisco. By 1898, they had a branch in New York. And this is a nursery that was bringing Japanese maples. Their very first catalog in the United States had 40 different Japanese maples listing different cultivars that were now becoming available in the United States.
It's super interesting. A lot of these cultivars were offered from that time frame right up until World War II. It said they ceased operation around 1939, which I found super interesting. And it's how a lot of these cultivars got into the United States markets. And we actually have this, one of the early catalogs here. This was actually a catalog from 1913, so a pretty cool thing to have. And just interesting too, it's very interesting to look into some of these plants. We'll do a little closer review of this, but some awesome cultivars that we grow today. So.
And while we'll be focusing on the maples, they had a lot of other interesting plants from Japan on their listings. In fact, many of the cherry trees, Yokohama Nurseries is one of the nurseries that was credited to being instrumental in the cherry trees in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and now they have that cherry festival in Washington, D.C., where the cherry blossoms are in bloom. It's very reminiscent of Tokyo when they have their cherry blossom festivals, and it's a huge event. Really cool. I mean, a lot of you probably already know about that in Washington, D.C., but a really interesting exchange of cultures there for sure.
So this nursery, Yokohama Nurseries, started bringing it in Japanese maples into the United States. They started coming into a lot of the ports in New York, Philadelphia, and they started getting out there. And then people like Homan were some of the people that were getting Japanese maples often from them and importing them in through different routes and selling them all across the United States as well. So a lot of other nurserymen were then working through Yokohama Nurseries to then make these plants even more popular all across the United States.
Now, several of these selections aren't necessarily introductions by Yokohama Nursery. I know several of these predate them. They're on the 1700s list, but this was a curated collection of plants offered at this time. And in 1913 United States, it's really interesting to see. Just for comparison, some of this interesting stuff like Oshiobini was offered here 1 to 2 foot at $1.30 per 10 in 1913, which I thought was really interesting. There's a full listing, and we'll break that down a little bit more. But we're going to talk about some of our favorite plants they were offering in that 1913 catalog, and just super interesting too. I'm actually going to read this one little segment. They were actually listing Acer palmatum back then as polymorphum. A lot of these introductions are already going to be named by some of their Latin names. So a lot of the trade was obviously already trading with Europe, and there were already some Latin influences on what they were presenting into America.
We've talked about Seabold before, because Seabold was born in the late 1700s, and most of his excursions to Japan were during the mid to early 1800s. And so when we're looking here at 1913 and 1898 when they first came to America, this is really when a lot of the Japanese maples were actually making their way into the United States via Japan.
Yeah, super interesting. I'm sure we'll do an upcoming deep dive on Seabold. I've got some funny stories about him from Cor Van Gelderen that his family's told, and just interesting stuff. So we'll dig more into Seabold in a future episode. If you're loving this kind of geeky maple stuff, let us know in the comments section below. This is what we're planning on doing with this Saturday showcase. So I want to read just a little bit of this at the top of this catalog. Basically, they're referring to Acer palmatum as Acer polymorphum at this stage. Acer polymorphum, the famous Japanese maple, None of the autumn trees excels this. Some change their colors, their leaves to yellows, others to red in the autumn. Some of these varieties giving rich crimson coloring in the spring when the shoot is well into autumn before they fall. Our assorted varieties are as follows. And so then it breaks down. We've actually got several pages here of some of the interesting cultivars they were offering.
I like their hook.
Yeah,
I like their hook. They're like, they've got good spring colors. There's some that have some good summer flushes.
And we're still doing the same thing today.
And they've got some great fall colors. Yeah.
Right. And it's interesting here. It's a very interesting mix. We'll take this in the office and do an up close of this.
I think it's interesting too that Acer atropurpureum, in parentheses, they're offering the cultivar Nemora, but to some nurserymen, they may be getting it as Acer atropurpureum and sort of misunderstanding the catalog and wondering if a lot of the Acer atropurpureums that came into America were seedlings from Nemora, the way this is set up. You see that?
Yeah. So first up here for our discussion today, we're going to be talking about Acer palmatum Osakazuki.
And all the plants we've got on here today are all ones that are on their catalog. Even some of these, the Osakazuki, the Shishi Gashira, and the Oshiobini, are actually listed as their introductions on the World Maple checklist, but they're not necessarily their introduction. They introduced them to the United States. These three cultivars actually predate Yokohama Nurseries on Japanese literature. So they definitely were around before Yokohama Nurseries was even founded. But all these plants are ones that they introduced here to the United States and made popular. And some of these are ones that y'all have in your garden, like Osakazuki. It's one of our most popular Japanese maples that we do. Every time we list it, it sells out super quickly.
Yeah, now these, some of these were even around the 1700s, but this would be the first time this collection was ever brought to the United States and presented in such a way. Very interesting plant. Osakazuki is highly sought after for that fall color. Now this tree leaves out a lush green in the spring, a bright picked up Kelly green, even chartreuse green in the spring, fading to a darker green, more of that Kelly green midsummer actually. But the fall color is really where this one shines. It is so popular for being one of the most bright, intense, fiery reds of any Japanese maple in the fall months. And that's why Osakazuki is so heavily sought after.
Yeah, it's a plant that I love so much. Osakazuki is a plant, makes a really nice upright tree. It's perhaps one of the best fall color Japanese maples out there. I mean, if you're looking for a tree that's just gonna light up, and it's unusual how it does it, because often this one will go to a deep red first, and you'll think that you've missed the fall color, and then it lights up as a brighter red after that,
right?
Which is so unusual. Typically, plants start out bright, then go dark as they're about to drop their leaves.
Often paired with Acer palmatum Hogyoku, they're going to have a very similar aesthetic throughout the spring and summer. Hogyoku go into a bold orange, with Osakazuki go into that intense red. So you get a completely different dynamic for two trees that look similar all year in that fall months. Now, when we were actually in Osaka on a Japanese TV show a couple years ago, we had a translator with us. And I had to say, hey, Ace K, does Osaka have something to do with Osakazuki? Being a foreigner to Japan, it made perfect sense to me. Saying Osaka, Osakazuki, I'm like, hey, I gotta be onto something here. And it turns out it has nothing to do with Osaka. What this actually pertains to is a specific cup, and the color of that cup is very reminiscent of the fall color on Osakazuki. So these colors, these cups are typically that brilliant, bright, picked up red. And if you're part of the Japanese culture, you'd understand right away the association of that intense color for what this one does in the fall.
Osakazuki, perhaps one of the very best fall color Japanese maples, and it's interesting that it was brought to the United States, this early, and you still don't see, I mean, it's popular, but it's still not something you don't see everywhere. You think it would be everywhere in the United States because of how amazing this plant is.
Great Japanese
It's a classic
maple.
Japanese maple that deserves a spot in everybody's garden. So I thought before we get into the next maple, it'd be interesting to read what Yokohama says about Osakazuki. And they say, a large leaf, regular palmate, light maroon, changing to blood red in autumn.
Hey, interestingly enough, it says right here, see Mr. Maple for further details. All right, so next up on the table, we've got one you've definitely heard of, and that's Acer palmatum Shishi Gashira. Now, Shishi Gashira is a classic Japanese maple. It's on that 1700s list, and many of you may know that this is one that's been around for a long time. The name actually refers to the female line. A lot of these older cultivars like this have haikus that specifically go with this cultivar, and this being the female line, there's a Mujishi, an Ojishi, and the Shishi Gashira. And Shishi Gashira, being the most popular of those, has some amazing growth rate as well as heat tolerance, and fall color. This is a green that's going to get to that darker green midsummer, and then in the fall, oh my gosh, it lights up. I mean, a lot of these early selections clearly picked for fall color. This one goes through orange with hints of red and yellow throughout it. One of my favorite fall color maples.
And Shishi Gashira is a classic one. If you're into Japanese maple, it's likely that you've got a lion's head Shishi Gashira in your garden. This is a plant that is amazing, and it made it to the United States through Yokohama Nurseries. Pretty awesome. And this plant is a classic. It's extremely easy to grow. The twist and curling leaves with that fall color make it look like a lion's mane. But like Matt said, this is referring to a specific lion in Japanese literature, so it'd be kind of like saying Mickey Mouse or something like that to specifically a classic Japanese literature.
Yeah, awesome plant, super durable. We've talked about Shishi Gashira a lot on this channel. You could definitely check out our full video on that one. We also have an Osakazuki video. But what this one's popular for, extreme durability. It's always popular for bonsai and bonsai culture because of those small leaves and heavy durability. But this one's going to do great in high heat areas, up to zone 8 in full sun, extreme exposures, and like we said, excellent fall color. So it always brings a lot, whether it's in the container or the ground. It brings a lot of high drama. Now, it is a very unique plant. Oftentimes, you know, even master gardeners will say, "Are you sure this is a Japanese maple?" I've had people say it to me at garden shows before, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm positive." But it is a very unique plant that's outside the box. So it's a little bit something that maybe somebody would walk up and go, "I don't know if that's a Japanese maple or not." It might not be what we think of traditionally as a Japanese maple, but an excellent cultivar.
Yeah, and it's got a unique leaf. The leaf is just so curling and twisted that it makes this plant stand out. It gives it a very unique texture out in the landscape and garden. And with that compact habit, with that textured leaf, it really makes this tree stand out from many other Japanese maples in your garden and landscape.
So we'll go here. This is actually the 26th tree in the catalog with Shishi Gashira. They have a very brief description for this one, but I do like it. Very curious, rotate leaves. So really unique plant. Very interesting. They're 1 foot of these were $1.30 back in the day. So per 10. So you can pick those up wholesale $1.30 for a 1 footer, which Tim found out roughly translates to like 10 times that now.
Yeah. Pretty awesome plant. It's one of our favorite Japanese maples. When you go to our gardens, we've planted way more than 2 of these. And our rule typically is we keep 2 of every single tree. And I think we've got 2 planted at Mom and Dad's, 1 planted at your house, 1 planted at the rental house. We've got 2 planted at Hillstone Arboretum. And so it's very obvious that we love this plant because we've got it planted everywhere. It really stands out and is something special. And it's definitely a tree that's a classic from Yokohama Nursery that you could have in your garden. So next we've got Acer palmatum wabito. Now I'll just start off by reading off how Yokohama Nurseries describes it. And they describe it as green with feather-like leaflets.
Yeah, it's an interesting plant. It's certainly unique in the nursery trade. It's another one that has a very irregular style foliage. This one has that kind of curling, irregular. Every leaf is a little bit different shape to this one. It's a green that's going to go through some interesting color changes, often yellows and oranges in the fall, but a very, very durable plant.
Now I love this plant. It's unusual in its leaf because it has a solid leaf, but it's almost like it's variegated green on green because it's got a darker green splotching around the edges on the serrated leaves. And there's not really another Japanese maple that has a leaf quite like wabito.
Yeah, it's also very irregular in its shape. As this one grows into an upright, it's a little spindly and open, which gives it a really unique appearance for a Japanese maple. I would consider it almost twisting in its habit. These aren't typically going to be your street tree form Japanese maple. So if you're growing this one, it's not going to be shaped like Emperor One.
And the name on this actually means lonely man, which is really interesting because, you know, what do you think of, like, why would you have named a plant Lonely Man? But it's a really cool Japanese maple. It's a classic from Japan, and it really stands out in every way.
So next up here on the table, we have Acer palmatum Oshio Benny, not to be confused with Oshu Benny.
Not to be confused with a lot of plants, but Oshio Benny is really different in the fact that it's more of a maroon color. It goes a little bit lighter color during the summer, but when this thing peaks up in fall color, this thing is just electric. I mean, it's one of the brightest fall color red Japanese maples. For a red Japanese maple to start off, it gives you some of the best fall color, and it's a plant that's extremely heat tolerant. I know our good friend, Coach Pat Dye, this was one of his favorite plants down at Auburn
It's got great consistent fall color
Got
down there.
great consistent down there, yeah.
Yeah, more of an ovate vase shape for this one. Nice upright form. I'll dive into theirs, but I actually have to read a precursor to that. The number 1 cultivar they had here was Acer achroporum, and that one is listed as Nomura, and then it says a deep maroon, large regular leaf palmate. So the number 2 here is Acer, and it would actually originally said polymorphum, but we'll know there's a palmatum to us now, Oshio Benny. And it says same as the preceding, but with more deeply cut and smaller leaves. And interestingly enough, a 1 to 2 footer was $1.30 in 1913 there per 10 if you bought them wholesale. So you could actually buy these for the American nursery trade at that point directly from Japan and then offer them at your place, which was pretty cool.
Oshio Benny though, great upright Japanese maple, and the reds aren't your traditional red upright. I mean, it is the one that stands out from your blood goods, your Emperor Ones, your Oshu Benny. I mean, Oshu and Oshio are clearly 2 different plants. One goes a little more emerald color, emerald cast in it, where this one here still has some more of that bronze red color to it.
Just a sampling of some of the trees they were offering. They were offering some pictums like Osakazuki, Nishki, and Hoshi Adori. I mean, there's some fun stuff in this catalog, stuff that people still consider cutting edge to this very day. You know, we put Hoshi Adori on the website. That one sold out in 5 minutes flat, right? So, I mean, Osakazuki, the same thing. But.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to nursery office and do a little bit more deep diving onto this catalog and see what else they might have been offering and discuss the catalog a little further.
Let's do it. Hey guys, we've hopped up to the Mr. Maple podcast room to talk to you a little bit more about the catalog here at Yokohama Nursery.
We've got an Osakazuki video running in the background. I think this catalog from 1913 is pretty spectacular. You don't get that kind of piece of nursery history that often. I mean, most of the catalogs are thrown away. You don't find something that's over 100 years old about Japanese maples in the United States.
Now, we did mention that Yokohama Nursery was founded in 1890. I'll probably butcher this guy's name, but it's U-H-E-I. I think that might be Uhei or Uhei Suzuki. And 3 other nurserymen were pioneers in the horticulture industry there in Japan. And around 1890 is when this kind of originated. Now, our listing here that we actually have is a catalog from 1913. So a little bit more established at this point. They had actually been in the United States and in London for a little bit at the point of this coming out. They opened a branch in New York in 1898 and in London in 1907. So they'd expanded quite a bit prior to this coming out. And we're really starting to export Japanese maples all over the world. Some interesting highlights from this one. You know, they were selling, we mentioned some of the cultivars that we talked about. Number 3 down here, Acer japonicum Italia. Italia in hyphenated letters there. And it says, circular shaped large green leaves with shallow segments. Now they were selling 1 to 2 footers of this for $1.30 at this time. I love seeing some of those other species make their way into these, not just all polymorphums on the list.
I like the bottom of the catalog that says price is in U.S. gold. That's how classic and old this catalog is. It makes you realize, you know, this is super classic. The Seijin number 4, it says blood red, regular palmate, coloring in the middle spring, but it also says Acer sanguineum Seijin, which is an interesting way that's describing the Seijin. I wonder if that's considering like the Shindasojo types as like a sanguineum group or something like that.
There's so much interesting documentation here and so much that has even changed over time and morphed from what we're reading here. I mean, I noticed you pointed out number 6, Versicolor, and it basically says Orita no Nishki. And I mean above that. So Versicolor and Orita no Nishki, white and green irregular variegated. And again, 1 to 2 footers were $1.30.
And you see how someone could easily get these things mislabeled, but it also could be like we see the sanguineum, where it said sanguineum, and that's like a grouping. The versicolor could be the grouping.
Right.
So it may be like saying the versicolor group, Orita no Nishki. It may have been some of like the first listings of the different groupings of these cultivars. So it may not be actually saying these two are the same.
And you're also dealing with early Romanji. And Romanji is basically just the way it sounded when a Japanese nurseryman said it. Someone wrote it down phonically. And so rules for Romanji have probably gotten a little more refined since then too, as these were very early translations.
Look at number 5, Acer roseum. And then in parentheses, it has Kagiri, which is probably what we know today as Kagiri nishiki or Kagiri nishki, because it says small palmate leaves margined with deep pink.
Maybe.
Almost like a Beni Shishihinga type cultivar.
Possibly, yeah. There's so many interesting things on here. There's several of these that we definitely, have in the trade today. I go through here. One of the things that stops me is number 12, Acer polymorphum is what they're calling palmatum, but reticulatum, and that just says Shigetatsu. Obviously, probably going to be some variation of Shigetatsu Sawa, one of those early cultivars. Green network variegation on yellow ground. That catches my eye. I'm like, that's interesting. What is that all about?
Number 8, backtracking a little bit, says Acer atro, which probably means Acer atroporum dissectum, because that's like, and then it says variegatum, which means it's a variegated Acer atroporum, and it says Toyama, which is Toyama nishiki.
Yeah, super interesting. Iwashi no O, definitely one you're going to recognize there on the list. Okushimo, Alcha nishki. Some different spacing on some of these.
Acer aureum, circular shaped, obtusely cut yellow leaves. That's Acer sirasolinum aureum.
Yeah. You're talking 1913 on the list here. Scoliopendrifolium rubrum, as well as Scoliopendriforum green. And it also says it's the same as Al Shimonouchi in this list, which is interesting. And it says Scoliopendriforum rubrum would be the same as Aka Himenouchi. So now interesting that at that time frame those were considered possible, the same.
And then 21, Akikaze nishki. And it doesn't say on this list the truncatum like a lot of people in America often mislabel it. In Yano's book, it labels Akikaze nishki as a pictum dissectum.
Yeah, I think that's probably even closer to the truth. Yano, I love, maybe we'll do a deep dive about Mr. Yano. Yano-san is so knowledgeable. We've visited him with World Maple Park several times. Yano-san actually gets into the genetics. So he actually does genetics testing to provide and back up his information. When he says something is in a specific species, if he says
this is aminum, because this is where this falls when it's genetics.
Yeah, he backs it up with all the credentials you possibly can.
But I always find it interesting. People always list that one as truncatum, and it's a selection from Japan. But yet, I don't know of anywhere in Japan where Acer truncatum is actually native, because it's actually a Chinese maple. And Acer pictum dissectum, which looks similar, is native to Japan. The Wabito we talked about. 23 in that Rosio marginalis group, Hikasiyama. You notice they're spelling it with the K. It is the same thing as Higashiyama spelled with the G, H-I-G.
You'll see a lot of that early on. Now, 29 is another classic you'll know. Acer polymorphum. I'm going to start saying that. Today we're going to be talking about some polymorphums. Tsumagaki. So that's that red nails. Regular small palmate leaves, plain green. But as we know, that one today has that purple nail to it.
Number 30, Suri nishki. We've offered that before. Ribbon-like leaves, deeply cut. I mean, that describes that plant perfectly.
Number 33 catches my eye. Acer pictum album here. Large lobed leaves, white variegated height. Again, only $1.30 per 10, which would be a pretty good steal for Tokiwa nishki these days, right? I look at that one. Well, what's that all about? I like those little in parentheses explanations. 34 there's pretty interesting too.
And then 36, Acer pictum aureum group, Hoshiadori, yellow variegated.
Right.
I mean, these plants are definitely interesting on all of this. But what is also interesting, now we went through the ones that we recognize. What about the ones we don't recognize that you don't see today? I mean, if you go down this list on this and you start looking through here, obviously Chichio is kind of common. Alchinishki, not too common to get the yellow and green mottled variegation on a plant, but the one below it, the Alba no Fuye.
Okay, so some interesting terms down here for number 40. Now, I'd been told the term Dantsugi came from Isley Nursery. So here clearly predates that. Number 40, grafted maple Dantsugi. And they have it D-A-N-T-S-U-G-I, so Dantsugi. By grafted maple, we mean several varieties, 4 to 5 kinds, onto one single plant. So
we're not even talking two. We're
not talking two. Yeah, and it says these are 1 to 1.5 feet. Now these bump up the price a little bit. So if you're getting these look like they're $2 per that 1 to 1.5 foot tall I guess that's per 10, and then per 100 you can get that for $17.50.
It's a shame Yokohama Nursery isn't doing this today.
Crazy. Okay, so another crazy one. The next one, 41, grafted Megane maple. So that's Megane. And again, I'm guessing on how some of these are said. I'm just trying to phonetically do my best here, guys. By this we mean 2 stems twisted and grown together to form an 1/8" of Arabic figure specialties in 4 to 5 kinds grafted on them. So basically they're making a twisted braid and then grafting 4 to 5 different cultivars on there. Now those even go for more. So if you're going to get one of those per 10, those are $2.50. So we're actually talking some pretty good money in 1913 for $2.50 a piece.
So we went through here and looked at a bunch of these things, but have you ever heard of number 28, an Uriha nishki? Large leaves like those of a melon, green, and yellowish variegation.
Unfortunately, that's one that doesn't give you the breakdown. So we don't know if they were considering that an Acer polymorphism. It's just A period. And then we don't have that in parentheses. Often those give us our best clues toward what that's actually called now.
You wonder if that could be anything. Yellowish variegation, large like a melon, like a Usagumo,
right? Easily
or
could
something.
Be an Usagumo. It could be an Acer japonicum. It could be an Acer Sure Solidum type. Very interesting stuff here. I mean, I really enjoy digging into some of these older cultivar catalogs. If you like this kind of geeky maple content, let us know in the comment section below. This is the kind of content we want to bring you on these Saturday showcases. Tim and Brian and I, we love to get into the weeds with the really interesting outside-the-box topics. And we hope you've enjoyed, this breakdown of Yokohama Nursery. So basically, we just wanted to get this catalog that we had out here and talk about it and just talk about some of the things that interested us about Yokohama Nursery's catalog from 1913.
This is a nursery that started in 1890. We've got a catalog from them 23 years after they started, but really when they were really getting in full force at selling to the United States. But yet this nursery is still around today in Japan.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy the generational nurseries that are in Japan. And you really don't find that often as much in the United States.
Very interesting stuff, and it's definitely how a lot of what we do today at our nursery got here to the United States, became popular, got to gardens around the world, and it's just an interesting piece of history. So I hope you love this deep dive we do. Again, our Saturday showcases are the perfect place for this. We're going to be premiering these videos Saturdays at 9 a.m. So if you love this kind of content, let us know in the comment section below. We greatly appreciate you jumping in these premieres. But guys, also let us know future collections. We're always looking at different ways to break down some of this content. We love doing this too. So it gives us a reason to get some of the stuff on camera, to talk to you guys about it. We recently did a video on some of our favorite cultivars we're growing here at our nursery from Australia. And hey, just let us know if there's different collections you'd like to see. We've already done videos on several of our Area 51 collections, as well as the Ghost series. So look forward to more nurseryman breakdowns, but also by country, by collection. And sometimes we'll just dig into a little bit of the history here like this.
I love the history behind the plants because the history behind the plants is how we have it today. Every plant's got a story behind it. And when you learn that story behind the plant, that plant takes on a whole new life in your garden. And that's the thing that I love the most about plants is all this stuff that goes behind it that then we can then enjoy the plant now because of it.
Right.
And I love that we can dig into this a little bit. We really appreciate you all watching this video.
Hey, I greatly appreciate anybody geeky enough to make it to this part of the video. You're the geekiest of Maple Geekiest, and we love you.
Well, yeah. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. Make sure you like this video. Share this video with your gardening friends. I'm sure your local garden clubs would love to see a deep dive into Yokohama nurseries and some of this we're talking about.
Hey, Tim and I used to go do talks all over, and we're still going to be getting into more of that, but this gives us a chance to share some of the content we would be providing at Garden Talks directly to you every single day. So definitely sub here if you like this kind of stuff.
Take care.
God bless.
And have a great day.